This is Dan Vondrak, Creative Director for Marvel Ultimate Alliance, and welcome to a very special episode of Power of X-Men.
Our guest today is the Senior Creative Director over at Raven Software. He's worked as a programmer for Star Wars Jedi Knight 1 and 2, and has recently directed the campaign for Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. But most importantly, and this is the reason why he's here today, he was the director for X-Men Legends 2, Rise of Apocalypse, and Ultimate Alliance 1. Please welcome Dan Vondrak. How are you doing?
Really good. It's like obviously the Cold War shipped, which is a huge relief, and then it's really fun to reminisce about X-Men Legends and Marvel Ultimate Alliance. It's games that are incredibly close to the entire team's heart. So this will be fun.
Can I tell you a secret?
Go for it.
I haven't played Call of Duty. Like, I'm the only one in my family, my little brother, all my primos, all my friends, they play Call of Duty, but I haven't played it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Not a big concern for me. There's plenty of people that like it. So.
But I'm a crazy X-Men fan. So, but I gotta tell you, when I was Googling you, I mean, Call of Duty, it's everywhere. I mean, that's a huge campaign to be working on. Congratulations on that. I mean, that is a household name.
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty crazy journey. Like, we obviously did a lot of the X-Men and Marvel games, and it was, I mean, just a ton of fun. And then we moved over to Call of Duty, and for us to finally really get our shot to kind of lead the campaign last year, it was crazy. I mean, to know that like we're getting charts back, and it's like, hey, so many millions and millions of people are playing through this content, and we're kind of seeing the stats and the data on it. It kind of blows your mind when you're just thinking, you're trying to make something that you hope you would enjoy and that other people would enjoy, and then it's like millions of people are playing it. So it's a lot of fun. It's pretty cool.
Are you wearing a Wolverine shirt?
Oh, yes.
Let me see. I'm wearing a jean shirt.
Oh, yes. The logo. Yeah, totally.
So I want to, I have so many questions about X-Men Legends 2 and Ultimate Alliance 1, but I want to get to know you a little bit more, because I think people who work in video games just have such an interesting journey in how they get there. And when I was at HarperCollins, I published a book about video game development, and it was called Blood, Sweat, and Pixels by Jason over at Kotaku. And one of the things I never realized as just a fan of video games is the amount of time, passion, and work that goes into a video game. And oftentimes you guys don't even know if it's even going to be finished in time for a release date, or even if it's going to go further in development. So I guess my question is, how did you start off in video games? Was that something you always wanted to do?
I never thought I'd be in video games, for sure. Like, looking back on it, realizing, oh, I'd write these dumb little stories, or I realized I maybe spent more time thinking about video games than I had realized. But I went to college here in Wisconsin, was planning on I was going to get biology. I did. I got a major in biology, a minor in chemistry. I was thinking maybe I'd go to medical school, which I know I never would have been good enough for. But those are the thoughts that were going through my head. And then, believe it or not, I saw an ad in a Nintendo Power. I was still in college and still getting Nintendo Power.
I miss Nintendo Power so much.
I know, it's such a... I first subscribed when you got the Dragon Warrior game for free. It was like this promo. And so anyways, it was, Nintendo Power. So it's got good feelings to it. So I saw this ad for a school that Nintendo had close to their headquarters. And I was like, well, I kind of sort of programmed a little bit when I was a kid. I just kind of messed around with stuff. I wasn't what you would call a real programmer at all. And I thought, man, I've never been more passionate about wanting to do something. And I talked to my parents about it. And, they said, well, listen, finish up, graduate with a real degree. So if anything happens, you have that to fall back on. And I went to, it's a school called DigiPen. It actually started up in Canada, but then we were only there for like maybe 4 or 5 months. And they said, hey, we're going to actually move it down the Nintendo buildings themselves. Like, they was literally right there next to Microsoft and Nintendo and all those guys. And so we moved down there, and just threw everything I could into it. And it was pretty crazy. I was just coming back. It's like a 4-year deal, right? You could do it in 2 years if you wanted to, in a smaller degree, but I was thinking I'd go for 4 years. I was just coming back to Wisconsin and drove back here with my then fiance just to get married. And my wife actually had seen an ad for another game company in Wisconsin. And then also I was like, whoa, there's game companies in Wisconsin. That's crazy. I thought I was gonna have to like live in Texas or California or something. So went in to get a tour of Raven. I, emailed somebody here and gotten someone at Raven and gotten a tour scheduled. So my wife, was with me. It was like, I'm like, I'll be like 20 minutes. I'm just gonna get a tour. Well, I was in there for almost 3 hours and actually ended up sitting with Pat, Pat Lippo, who you'd previously interviewed. And he was the programming lead. And he just started asking me all these questions. And I was like, is this an interview? I thought it was supposed to be a tour. Well, 3 hours later, I walked out. My wife was like, what the heck happened? We were supposed to get lunch. And I was like, I think I just got interviewed. But so I don't know. And we drove all the way back to Seattle, right? Because I was going to start I think that would have been the third year of school. And I was actually working for Nintendo QA during the summer. And suddenly I get this call at the Nintendo QA building because that was the only phone number I really had. And it was Mike Crowns, the guy that gave me the tour. And he's like, hey, we want to offer you a job. And I was like, what? It was just surreal. And so
that's insane.
Yeah. I mean, I was just staying there in the Nintendo buildings. We were just, QAing some game. And I was like, we had just like drove all the way back from getting married in Wisconsin. And also I was like, oh my God. And I was like, well, yeah, of course. I didn't even think about it. So yeah, there you go. That's how I got into video games. Pretty crazy.
And did you play a lot of video games growing up?
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, I for sure. My family had an Atari, so it was a lot of Space Invaders and Pac-Man. But then my parents bought an Apple II GS, and that's where I really fell in love with just like computers. And I wouldn't call it programming, but there are ways you could like draw pixels on the screen. And as soon as someone showed me how to draw a pixel, me and my brothers were drawing, enough pixels to make pictures, or like we got so excited because we made something that said FBI warning, and like we could figure out a way to put it on our games disc and, and make someone type in a password for it. And so like, that's about the extent of programming we did. But yeah, looking back, like I still have sheets of notebooks of story ideas that I had written down that I totally forgot I'd even done. It was in my parents' house. So yeah, I guess I did play a lot of video games.
Was there a particular video game growing up that you absolutely loved and that sparked that passion?
Yeah, there's a game, favorite game of all time. It's called Wasteland, and it's a role-playing game. Mm-hmm. And you could have 4 characters, in it.
We love that formula here.
Yeah. You could name them, and you could, and it was really simple. It was a super simple game, but it was like this experience where like you could go anywhere. It was like almost the first open world. So yeah, I think Wasteland was great. And so tons of different games like that just were fun. They were open world, and just a lot of different games back then that were just trying inventive things back on the old Apple II days.
So you're at Raven now. Have you been at Raven all this time since that tour?
Yeah, way back 2000. Took that tour and then all of a sudden got hired, and whatever it was, 4 or 5 weeks later, moved back to Wisconsin. Haven't moved since.
How has Raven evolved over the last 2 decades, in your opinion?
It's pretty crazy. When I got hired, I think I might have been number 45 or something like that, or maybe number 50 there. And now we're up, past 260 or something like that. And
that's insane.
Yeah, for sure. We've always been in RPGs, and, Dungeons and Dragons is kind of where it all got started. In fact, the name Raven comes from the brothers who started the studio, Brian and Steve Raffel. They played a ton of Dungeons and Dragons, and they had a character named Lord Raven, and they loved him, right? They had made up this character called Lord Raven. So that's when they started the studio. That's what they decided to name the studio was Raven, after that character. So those are kind of the deep RPG roots we've got. And
I didn't know that story. Thank you for that.
Yeah. It's those guys are just, the culture that they brought to the studio was just like focus on the fun, focus on like what you would want to do as a player. Like, why is this cool to you? Because if you enjoy it, there's other people out there that are going to enjoy it, and they're going to feel that passion. So that's really how they built the studio, bringing people in that were passionate about things. And that culture has stayed, ever since I've gotten here, even though, we went from, the first thing I ever did was Star Trek Elite Force. They had just shipped that game, and I'd just come in, and maybe there was going to be an expansion. So I started to work on that. Then next up, like you mentioned, were the Star Wars games, which were huge. And then suddenly it was X-Men and, the Marvel games. And when we went to Call of Duty, we just brought that same passion. We said, listen, we've always kind of done a lot of stuff with first person shooters, and let's do that same thing. So luckily that kind of family atmosphere is definitely still around. So that's welcoming for sure.
Did you that first day you walked in at Raven, did you ever think you were going to work on these A-list properties like Star Wars and Marvel, but then also Call of Duty, which, I mean, that's something that just came from the ground up. That was made into a household name. That wasn't something that existed before. Did you even fathom that?
Not at all. I mean, you have to understand, it's like you're just a fan of video games, and you sit there and you play them and you think to yourself, oh boy, well, how come this game doesn't do that or doesn't do this? And so you just want to, like, man, I just wanted to be a part of the process of anything and just help in any way. And so to get there, and like Star Trek's I'm a huge geeky Star Trek fan. Always loved the classic show. So to get there and start to work already on Star Trek, like day one, I was just like, what is going on? This is insane. I just kept thinking, don't fire me. Don't fire me. Like, and everything I did, I just was like, they're going to find out that I'm not as good as they think I am. So no, I never, like I said, it's even back then, like when you're playing and if you try to wrap your head around the fact you're going to play something and like 1,000 people are going to, either read words you wrote or, experience this mission you made. And then you start thinking, well, 100,000. And then it's like, well, man, could 500,000 people actually play this? Like, it just kind of blows your mind to think about. And now video games have just blown up. Back when it was like, if you got to 1 million, that was a huge deal. And now it's kind of like, well, it's either 10 million or bust in some ways, for some properties. So
my brother-in-law works at Petroleum Advertising, which they focus on video games.
Yep,
I think.
Totally.
Okay, so he works there. He was telling me that video games have exploded since the pandemic. I mean, obviously, I get it. I mean, I've been playing so many video games during this pandemic, and I'm curious, how has the industry changed with the pandemic?
It was rough. So yeah, at first, everyone just assumed every game we were working on was going to get delayed. And then we got home, and like I'm sitting in the office of my house right now. It's my son's bedroom, actually. And after a few weeks of working, you're like, wait a minute, this is okay. This can actually work. We can get work done. I can, play the game and test the game. And I've got my PlayStation 4 test kit and dev kit for the PlayStation 5 sitting here. So the good news is it's people have gotten more flexible. And I think even when we get back to work, once this pandemic starts to die down, everyone starts to get vaccinated and we start to get back to work. Good news is I think everyone's going to learn to be more flexible. We're going to allow actually a lot more. If you can work from home at certain days you need to, go for it. We've kind of learned that's a good thing. Yeah. And there's just been a lot more communication, and the team, what I've found personally is you just depend a lot more on the team members. Like, I'm sitting here today talking to you, and that's great. And I'm doing it because, I'm labeled creative director, but the truth is the team is the one that puts the game together. And if it's not for like everybody and each one of those guys putting in their passion, it just doesn't play as well, or doesn't, isn't as cool of an experience. So working from home, those guys had a lot less like direction from either someone like me or other leads. And I actually think it was a great thing. Like they said, boy, it's on my shoulders. I don't have someone around to pull next to me. I'm just going to make the decision. And I think everybody grew a lot that way, and it helped a lot.
That's such an interesting perspective. And that's spoken like a really great captain of a ship, and I know there's so many moving parts in making video games and so many different sections, but the way you just spoke about people having that autonomy and taking those own creative leaps that they wouldn't otherwise have done if they were in an office and they're not just like, hey, Dan, can you just like approve this for me? Like, no, Dan's not here. You have to make that. So hearing you speak just now, and also when I was talking to Patrick, I just assumed video games are making a lot of money. The industry is thriving. Everything's great. But he also, and this is sort of what you echoed, kind of, they didn't know when the pandemic hit what was going to happen with the production schedules. People were just buying, but you guys in the background, you have to have those creative relationships. You have to be able to test the games and go into a space and talk about that.
Yeah, and I think that was probably the hardest part is that last 10% when you just want to like, hey, we're going to grab this dude and hold him over a ledge, and we kind of want him to, we're going to we want to have to fall off this way. And like normally when you're in the studio, people get up and they act it out and they go, well, no, I want to literally have the fist land here and have his head, all this different stuff. It was hard to do. Even now, it's like over Zoom, it's hard to do that last little 10%. Or I could sometimes see somebody in the room and like in the office, I can see him being quiet and I could see him thinking, and it was easier for me to go, hey, whoever it is, you haven't spoken up, but you got any thoughts on this? And it's a little harder to do just, virtually like this. I don't know why that is. It's just sometimes harder to get the read on people.
No, I do a lot of virtual events, and it's really hard to like connect with people. Like I think it's different when you're doing like a one-on-one, like how we're doing now. Like I feel very connected with you, but when you're in like a Zoom and you have all the tiles there, it's hard.
Yeah, for sure. And so that's been the kind of tight knit relationship has been tough. Now, luckily, this team, what we call affectionately the Marvel team, there's a ton of people that are right now are on this Call of Duty team that were the Marvel team. I mean, there are people that were making those boss fights in X-Men Legends 2, and they're still there. We're having discussions every single day, and guys that were making powers and character art. And so luckily it's a super tight knit 15-year veteran group that's been around. And then when we do get new people in, man, the passion they bring and like this new ideas. And it's been awesome to just kind of see. That's the best thing about growing is when you get somebody new in and they start speaking up within the first few weeks. And it was just like, yeah, it's awesome. Like, one of the things, so in that last Cold War game, the big deal for us was we let the player create their own character. And because I'm just always someone that likes to like, hey, let the player be the person they can be, unless obviously you're playing a licensed character. And we had somebody new that spoke up, and she was one of our UI people. And I said, hey, we're going to have this, character creator, and we're going to have male and female characters. And she spoke up and she said, is there any reason we can't do any kind of gender neutral option? At first I was like, well, wait a minute, what would that, I don't even know how that would work. What would that be mean? So, but I was like, well, no, let's think about it. And thanks for bringing it up. And because she brought that up, we were able to add a non-binary, when you create your character, it's like male, female, non-binary. And that was from someone that sparked from someone that she was only here a couple months. And like, that's the interaction where you're just like, that's huge to get people.
I love that. I love that you guys did that.
Yeah. Well, it's fun. And it was just, like I said, video games are changing, and it's fun to see, again, get that just reflection of all of society and all the different culture that we get in from the group. So, but we've learned to adapt for sure. So work from home has gotten better, and I think, we'll be back in the office soon enough.
So I want to know who's on the Marvel team, the veteran Marvel team.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are guys. So Dan Edwards was a programmer, and he was a guy that like when you, all the fight moves and everything else you did, like he had created this system called the fight style system so like this allowed us to just kind of flow through all these different powers and all the different fight moves of the enemies. All of them use this system. Ryan Donce and Simon Parkinson, if you enjoy the boss battles, those are the two that you can thank. Those two were so inventive with what they did. You've got Ryan Butts was a character artist for us. He did a ton of the different costumes for characters. Justin Negretti, designer, Mike Majernik, designer. These guys, they always wanted to push the bounds of what was possible with the levels. And then some of the animators that are still around are John Sinclair, Eric Schlottman. Like those guys would go to town. I don't even know. When I look back, I'm not quite sure how they got all the animations done for some of those mission briefings, for all the powers. If you love the effects, by the way, and the menus, a big hand in that was Jeremy Blumell. This dude, the effects for me a lot of times are what made those powers in X-Men Legends and Marvel Ultimate Alliance. Like what seemed like, hey, it's a beam attack. One of them Cyclops beams. The other might be like an Emma Frost thing or somebody else. And that was all Jeremy trying to make those effects look different. And certainly plenty of others I'm sure I haven't named. I know I haven't named have helped out, but those are the ones that come to the top of my mind.
The Jean Phoenix Force effect pink that was at the end of the trailer in X-Men Legends 1, when that first dropped back in, the early 2000s, I literally lost my shit because it was beautiful. Like you just see her doing it. It was a close up of her. The powers in the games, you guys nailed it. But before we get into the games though, I want to ask about your relationship with X-Men and who is your favorite X-Men character?
So I'm gonna leave Wolverine off the list only because he's, he is my favorite Marvel character, but wouldn't consider him just like pure X-Men. So I'm gonna just look at the group that way.
Okay.
Kind of what I would
I
consider.
like that distinction.
Yeah, it's just tough. Wolverine's kind of in a class of his own. Don't hate me for it. Cyclops is my number one.
No, I love Cyclops. I love Cyclops. Cyclops was the official stance of this podcast is that Cyclops was right.
Oh, okay, excellent. That's what I like to hear, because I got all kinds of. Everyone's like, oh, he's always the most boring. But a close two, I got to say, is Storm. I don't know if it's both because I think of them both as like leader personalities or someone like that. They just seem like Cyclops and Storm. It's like when kind of, the shit hits the fan, they're the two that like, they'll have the plan. They'll be, calm, and they'll go, this is what we need to do next. And so, those are easily, Cyclops number one and then Storm number two.
Yeah, well, Storm and Cyclops are the leaders of the X-Men in my headcanon. We've had other characters step up and lead, and I'm like, okay, that's cute, but the only leaders I really accept are Cyclops and Storm. And Cyclops, I was just talking about this on an Instagram Live the other day. In the comic books, the Pretender, aka Wanda Maximoff, decimates the mutants, right? She removes the mutant X gene. And the only one who stepped up to try to save the mutants was Cyclops. And he got shit done. And it couldn't have been Xavier. It couldn't have been Magneto. It had to be Cyclops. And Storm, every time I see Storm on a team, she's in Marauders now, I'm just like, she is born to lead. Like, she just, like, her presence on the panel, I was going to say in the room as if she's here with me, her presence on the panel, it's just, you gravitate towards her. So I'm right there with you, man. Did you watch the animated series growing up?
Oh, huge fan. And actually, I've listened to, is Julia and Eric Leland, I think it was?
Leewald, yeah.
Leewald, there you go. That podcast was awesome to listen to. I had no idea that they were married, that they were part of it. Huge fan of the animated series. I mean, that's really where I got most of my X-Men knowledge from. Like, comic book wise, I tended to be a bit more into the Batman and Superman stuff, and only kind of dabble in some of the X-Men stuff. But that animated series, I know you're not a big fan of Beast, but let me tell you, at least he was done right in that series. I loved everything they did, and that was awesome. So I love the animated series. There's a big influence for sure.
Yeah, the official stance of this podcast is fuck Beast. But but hey, thank you so much for listening to the past episodes and doing some research before coming on. That really just made my morning. I mean, you've been so great so far, but thank you for that.
No worries at all. It's like I didn't realize people had podcasts just about the X-Men. And then it's funny. It's like one episode you guys were talking about like, oh man, the 90s and Blockbuster, and then like when you guys talked about the decrepit Toys R Us buildings, it hit the home because I had just been driving past the Toys R Us. I was listening to it in the car. And it is so sad when I see those old Toys R Us buildings. And I was like, oh man, so much childhood in those buildings, and now it's gone.
I agree. And kids today have it so easy because you can go on eBay, Amazon, wherever, and like buy the figures you want. Even if you have a natural curiosity for the X-Men, you just type in Magma, Storm, Wiki, and that's it. You get all of their information. And I was talking about this with one of the X writers, Zeb Wells, about why was fandom so great in like the 90s, is because you had to go out and be a little archaeologist and mine that sort of information. And like for the longest time, the only thing I knew about Magma, for example, was what I had on a Fleer Ultra 94 card. That's it. For 4 years, Dan, I didn't know more or less about Magma. And that made when I got to know her more, far more, valuable to me. And yeah, it's just Toys R Us seeing that. Like, I went hunting for action figures there.
Yeah, and it's like you'd pick up the box, like, our mom would drop us off, me and my brothers, and we'd just be like an hour just walking around, and we'd go back to the same miles over, and you'd read the back of the boxes and try to get whatever information you could. You didn't have like Google or anything like that to learn it. So, it was a different time. And like, in fact,
there wasn't even dial-up back then.
No,
there was not even dial-up.
No, not at all. Totally. It's like, or
the
like
internet did not exist.
it's like, Toys R Us back then used to sell comics too, so you could kind of cheaply read the comics by grabbing one of them off the rack, and we used to do that too. But I had an Omega Red action figure that was kind of bigger. I think he was like 10 or 12 inches, and I just at the time I didn't know who he was, but I was like, this action figure is awesome. And so saved up a bunch of money and I bought him, and I was so happy when we got to Legends 2. And I was like, one of the first names I personally wrote down was like, we're having Omega Red. So, he's going to be in the game.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask like a ton of X-Men Legends 2 questions. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So I think my first question, let's keep it a little general here. Were you on X-Men Legends 1?
Yep, absolutely. And when I first got, so the way that game, I'm not sure how much Pat talked about this. It was originally on a totally different engine. Raven was trying to make their own engine. It was like, can we spin up this kind of console engine of our own? Then eventually we moved to that Alchemy engine. And when we moved, I had just moved over. So I'd finished up Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast. And so, moved over to the X-Men team. And it was pretty new. I was just trying to get words printed on the screen. Like I was in charge of getting the menus working.
That was a great menu, by the way. I love that menu with Cerebro.
Yes, totally. Well, trust me, it was just a blue screen when we started. Now, again, I was like, oh my God, I'm getting fired. I don't even know how to do this. So that happened. And where really, though, I gained ground is once they kind of got me in the gameplay programming role. And I had only known the Quake engine, from what I did on the Jedi games. And so when I brought it over, we really didn't have much in the way of like characters moving around or much at all. And I was like, hey, I'm going to kind of style it after some of the things I learned from Quake. And that's where I started just making characters. Pat had jumped in. He was making Iceman slides. So yeah, I was gameplay programmer on X-Men Legends. I think one of the best days ever is I was working on Iceman, and previously the power was just like you freeze somebody and like little blocks of ice appeared around their feet and they kept animating. But I was like, well, can we spawn in, like if someone just builds me a model of an ice shell, and can I just make it I'll spawn on a fake character that's like an ice shell character, and can I just pause that animation? And the tech guys would give me a way to pause animations, and suddenly as I was doing it, and I was like, well, wait a minute, it's way cooler if you zero out gravity. It's like if you get them stuck in the air. And I remember at the time the lead programmer was like, that makes no sense. Ice doesn't make you freeze in air. And I'm like, I know, but it's just cooler if they have it happen. So yeah, I was a game programmer on X-Men Legends, and it's funny because I ended up bouncing between that and then Jedi Academy, which was the sequel to Outcast. And so I was bouncing back and forth. And I was a big part of that gameplay programming team, but a lot of the guys there just did so much work on like the powers and stuff. And so I was able to come in and work on enemies, work on heroes, all that kind of stuff.
So how did you make the leap to game director? And I know it's project lead, and I think Patrick clarified that it's all the same and it means something different for every company. But how did you end up being director of X-Men Legends 2?
Unexpectedly. I know, Pat had, informed us, hey, he was going to, move on and go somewhere besides Raven. And I think that was sometime, and so the game released in like, let's say September, I think, or something like that. He had told us that sometime around July. And so, he wanted to make sure we had plenty of time to plan for it. And Rob G, who's the co-project lead, said he didn't feel like he wanted to take that on again. He maybe wanted to try, a different role there, even though, so Rob G is a walking encyclopedia for Marvel stuff. So
I know I've heard, I've tried to track him down. I can't find him.
Yeah, he's still at Raven. We'll figure. We'll get you.
Oh,
that guy is
okay. Rob G, we're coming for you.
He was just like he was Google for me, for Mark. He was the Marvel Google. So
because again, Google didn't exist or Wikipedia didn't exist. You needed to have someone who knew this information. And by the way, the lore that you guys put in the games, it was tight. Like you guys were really right. I mean, you took your own leaps, of course, and you created your own universe. But I think the reason why the games and even Ultimate Alliance, especially Ultimate Alliance 1, you took so much continuity, put your own spin in it, but also respected it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And we would have. So there were the couple of guys that were key to that. Rob G, the co-project lead on X-Men Legends 1. Bob Love, who he was our writer. And so if you heard VO, if you got writing, if you got notes, he did everything. Bob Love, huge Marvel guy, amazing writer. Um, I don't even know how he got it done. So he was like my right hand man when it came to anything story, anything like dialogue. He was just wanting to write more and more and more and get every character right. And then Brian Pelletier was another. He was one of our art directors, and he was a huge Marvel geek as well. And so those three guys really grounded me. So Rob, so how it came to be that I went from gameplay programmer to the creative director, the project lead, is Rob had recommended it. And, Brian Raffle called me in and said, "Hey, who do you think should be, Pat stepping down? Who do you think should be project lead?" And I'd said, "Well, Rob," and a couple other names. And he said, "Well, what about you?" I was like, "What? Why would?" I was not expecting it at all. But Rob luckily put a good word in for me, and yes, if I got my opportunity, I was like, "Let's do this, man. Let's add to it, take what we started to build with X-Men 1." And that's where it really helped that I had been so intimate with like how we did the powers and how we did all the programming for it. It was easier for me to suggest changes, knowing what was either easier or harder to do for X-Men Legends 2.
How soon after X-Men Legends 1 was released did 2 go into production?
Before.
Oh, wow.
It was from a story standpoint and planning standpoint, like I think I found out in July that I was going to be the project lead, and it was like, cool, we're doing this. We loved it. I mean, that team, I guess I can't, the team was so passionate. Like they were little comic book artists, Jeff Butler, Les Dorscheid, Jeff Moy. These are guys that were like comic book artists that were on the team. And so everyone was like, whoa, almost like before they could even say yes, let's just start working on it and let's get as far as we can. So that way they have no choice but to say yes. So, I mean, Bob and I think we were in my kitchen in August while we were fixing bugs in August to get the game on X-Men Legends 1 and, finishing up any last dialogue bits Bob was, and I was fixing bugs. And then we'd spend a weekend here or there in the kitchen at my house working through what the story for X-Men Legends 2 would be. And of course, we'd run it always, like Rob was always there to help us, or he had tons of ideas on what they had kind of thought about doing post X-Men 1. So yeah, before X-Men even shipped, we at least started working on the story and the structure of the game.
Okay. And so I'm just curious, did you guys know X-Men Legends 1 was going to be a hit, and that's why you wanted to be proactive with doing a sequel? How does that typically work? I'm only comparing it to movies in my head right now, where it's like, oh, that movie did really well opening weekend, so we'll get a sequel. So I'm a little thrown off that you were already working on 2 before 1 came out.
Just a bunch of young, naive dudes. We had no idea. You have, when you put something creative out there, you have these huge fears at times. Mm-hmm. And then you also have, I think it's maybe part of my personality where either I'm totally up and I think this is the greatest idea ever, or I think, oh my God, everyone's going to hate it. So catch me at the right time. And it was like, dude, the game's going to be great. Let's make a sequel. We can do this. And so,
it was great.
Yeah, it's really weird to think about, like, it was just ideas back in July, and so now you're 15 years later, you're holding up the box. It's pretty cool. So we just, like I said, we started working on it, and by the time Activision said, yeah, okay, the game's selling well enough, we're already, month, 2 months into working on it, because it was a short schedule. It was,
yeah, it came honestly out so fast.
It was crazy. Like X-Men 1 took 3 kind of plus years, and I say that the way that game was a true game development of like, hey, it's a brand new engine, we have to work through everything. We didn't have what we call the fight style system. We didn't have the fight style system to let everyone move around. We didn't, like I said, we didn't have menus. I was putting the menus together. So that's 3 years. That's why I took it. So when it came to X-Men Legends 2, Brian, my boss, and Activision was like, well, the only way we're going to prove this, because again, sales were good for X-Men 1, is like, it's got to be a short enough budget. Can you get it done in 12 months? Which really and ultimately was 11 when you think about it. And yeah. I don't even know why we said yes. And I was just kind of like, we had no idea. Like the whole team was like, let's do it. Let's just do it. We'll figure it out. And so we just started, like I said, I've got some of the original docs in front of me. It's like, we just started mapping out, these are the cool things we want to experience. This was the high level story. And that was all done in a couple weeks. And we just started cranking. Having all the tools, making that sequel. Like I know Pat was kind of jealous. I heard him talking about that in the earlier podcast. He said he was kind of jealous, and it's understandably, like everything was sitting there for us. We just had to make new content. So it was a lot of fun.
What were some of those early ideas that you guys were tossing around in your kitchen?
The initial was like, okay, we all love Magneto. I love Magneto. I think he's one of the best bad guys.
Oh, absolutely.
And in fact, I think he might be the first X-Men I ever remember. It was like we used to buy comics for like a nickel at like some flea market. And there was this comic, and I think the cover was ripped off or something. It was Magneto was kind of on the page. And the way he was talking in the frame, talking about, rights for mutants or whatever it was, I was like, oh, hey, this is a cool looking good guy. What's this all about? I thought he was a good guy the way he had been talking. Anyway, so I'd always loved Magneto, and we just felt like we already played that card. What else can we do? And we had discussed a couple different things. We discussed Magma. I know people were a little upset that she was back. We discussed Magma, but my big push was, hey, listen, this time around, I want to make sure everyone has their favorites. And so I make sure everybody has a chance to play the person they want to play. Back on X-Men 1, it was great. And I've got zero complaints about the game. I wouldn't change anything about it. But at the same time, we structured it where it's like, no, you're forced to play this person here. You're forced to play that person there. There were times when co-op didn't quite work. There was a bit of a more single player focus. And this time around, I said, here's the deal. From the second someone pops the game in, they have to be able to play 4 characters. And we have to let them play any character they want. If they want to start on, second one of Cyclops and play all the way to the last hour on Cyclops, they have to be able to. Everyone has their own favorite character. So that was kind of the start. And the Age of Apocalypse story.
Just iconic.
Yeah, and Rob had introduced that to me back when we were just working on X-Men. Like, Rob was great. He, like you said, no other Google or computers or really, like, internet really. He would bring in stacks of comics. And I'm a sucker for alternate universe kind of stories because I just love, I don't know why. I think they're just so cool. I think I love taking whatever formula that we're used to and kind of flipping it on its head. And it just, there's always been something neat about that to me. So I gravitated towards Age of Apocalypse really quickly. And so even though we had talked about, would it be Magneto again or whatever else, we had said, hey, I think Apocalypse has something cool. So that ending for X-Men Legends 2, or X-Men Legends 1 rather, with Apocalypse, they had let me know, hey, we're putting Apocalypse at the end here. And, we could think about doing, Age of Apocalypse for the X-Men Legends 2. And I was like, yes, let's do it. So really, that was what that meeting was about, where like we would sit there between me and Bob and go, well, what's the coolest parts? And we talked about like the 12 and all these different stories that would come together. And it just felt like Apocalypse was the way to go. And we just loved the 4 Horsemen. And, we had already planned on Archangel in the first one, and that got cut. And I always liked actually the way Archangel looked a little cooler than Angel.
I was devastated that Angel was cut because, again, in the interview with Patrick, it was leaked. All the characters from the site were leaked, and Angel was there. And then he was replaced last minute by Jubilee, which was a great character too. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But if you're telling me I would have gotten Angel and then midway through the game, he would have turned into Archangel. Yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah. So we got the Age of Apocalypse pretty quick, and that was not, Activision was not on board at all with Age of Apocalypse.
Why not?
No.
That would seem like a no-brainer because it was probably, and it still is, the biggest X crossover, and everyone knows it.
We tried to explain that, but you have to come, like, from an Activision standpoint, the movies were out. The movies were doing really, really well. I mean, I think X-Men 1 and 2 they get shortchanged for how influential they were. I thought those were,
I agree.
That's what made comic book movies cool.
They set the bar. I mean, because before that we had Batman and Robin, which I love for its own campiness. Don't get me wrong, but the X-Men movies, Bryan Singer, who is a total D-bag, but like but like they set the bar there.
Yeah,
and
100%. And so that was the way Activision looked at things. Like, that was more mainstream. And I was like saying, hey, no, Wolverine's going to walk around with one of his arms cut off and he'll look like this. And
they're like, no, Wolverine needs both claws.
Right. Totally. And they weren't on board with it. And we had, we had really also discussed the Days of Future Past, which was, one of the most iconic ways. It was like, how can we do something like that again? Some kind of alternate universe. I just fell in love with that stuff. But the apocalypse, for what it brought for game structure wise, and what we could do there was where we had to go. So it was a rough going with Activision. They were, again, not on board with that. And that's why ultimately, it was going to be, was it Dawn of Apocalypse? Was it Rise of Apocalypse? It cannot be this weird alternate Age of Apocalypse, but yet we could take the story inspiration from it without it truly being a totally different world.
Did you want it to be, because the final product is a mashup of the 12 Age of Apocalypse and things, and listeners who probably don't know, Beast, for example, you don't get an alternate universe Beast. You get our Beast who dies, quote unquote, and then comes back as Dark Beast, which, by the way, was the best thing you ever did, was kill Beast. And like when Destiny said the X-Men Beast will die, I was like, yes, absolutely, kill that motherfucker.
That's awesome. That's hilarious. I love your your argument for why Beast is so bad. I listened to it and I was like, okay, you've got a point. Again, for me, I was like, animated series and Kelsey Grammer, come on, Beast.
Oh, those are peak. That's peak Beast. If those, like, I believe those versions of Beast actually went and got a PhD. But comic book Beast, I'm like, you're a fucking sociopath. You're a liar. Like, thank you, Nex. And thank you for not making him playable. I hope that was an active decision.
Well, yeah, it was. We didn't. Yeah, he wasn't exactly the most fun in X-Men Legends. So
he's not the most fun in the comic books either.
Yeah. So yeah, even though we couldn't have, my preference would have just been straight up to Age of Apocalypse, like the actual world. Except we never want to do it. We would have done more world changing stuff, like an actually alternate universe stuff. But we still, even then, Marvel. We had this really cool agreement with Marvel. What we told them is, they were like, hey, is this going to be like a direct sequel to X-Men Legends? And I said, it's going to be influenced, but what I like is, like, when I read comics and when I have fun is when each book kind of takes their own angle on things. I said, no, every single one of your books or series isn't totally in lockstep all the time. And I said, that's what I like these video games to be, is that we're not necessarily going to just recreate Age of Apocalypse 100%. We just want to use it as a basis. And then kind of tell our own version of it, because that's, to me, what's cool about comic books, is when there's just kind of slight alterations, or when a movie comes out and as a fan, you're like, oh, are they hinting at, Phoenix, or are they doing that? It's just, it's fun as a fan to be like, not just go, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen next. It's fun to find those hints. And Marvel was awesome. They were like 100% on board with that idea. So don't worry about it. Go ahead and mix and mash all together how you want to.
So what would have that in your head, what would that story have looked like? Would we have gotten like would we have picked up in the Age of Apocalypse, or would you have had like a Legion character go back in time and we would have seen how that universe changed?
Yeah, and so that was where actually we got stuck. We were like, okay, how are we gonna, like, someone's gonna pick this game up and just be thrown, like, the casual people are not gonna have any idea what they're doing. So we were going along the lines of, can we create it? But then we were worried we were going to spend such a long time with the setup and not just getting to the universe. And so we weren't sure. We kept getting hung up with that, with like, how do we introduce the players to this? And ultimately, the more we talked about it, that's what it was like. A big push for us was to get the Brotherhood to work together, Brotherhood and X-Men. We just liked, Bob was salivating at it. He was like, oh man, I want to do these mission briefings where they're talking back and forth. I love them giving, shit to each other. And so we really loved that idea. And it was like, well, let's start with that as the kernel. Like, listen, the X-Men and the Brotherhood are forced to work together. Why? Because the ultimate evil, Apocalypse, is there. And then from there, that can be our conduit. Like, everyone knows who the X-Men are. Everyone knows who the Brotherhood are. Let's start there with like normalcy for these people, and then kind of descend into the chaos of the Age of Apocalypse stuff. And we weren't sure where we would, like, how we would do an official like leap in time or to a different kind of universe. But by that point, it had pretty much been told, no, you can't do that anyway. So we just abandoned the idea.
Well, I agree, by the way. Like, how would you have done that for the casual gamer? Yeah. And what would it look like? So I'm glad Rise of Apocalypse ended the way it did, because you respected the continuity and the lore, and you had the Age of Apocalypse skins in there
Yeah.
as well. And you were also able to use a lot of other great characters in there. I mean, I know Destiny was in, Excalibur in the Age of Apocalypse, but you put her in a really real great way. And so my question is, how did you go about selecting the characters for this game? So like production's taken off,
Yeah.
you want to do the Brotherhood. There's so many characters there. How did you go about selecting those?
I'll tell you right now, I know it was hard. Like, trust me, we would have put in more characters. I got to say this to everyone else that hates me for removing Psylocke.
Yeah,
we would have put it.
I asked. I was like, so one of the when I put it up on the Instagram, I was like, what questions do you guys want me to ask Dan? And literally, I got 7 questions about Psylocke. Psylocke has a huge stan community, which I love Psylocke. I love Psylocke, but I did not realize the community that exists for Psylocke. So I'm sorry if you got.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize that either. I definitely know now.
Did someone attack your MySpace?
No, yeah, right, MySpace back then, totally. No, I got all kinds of. Oh man, there's a lot of funny jokes about that. So, how to select the characters? It was tough. So we clearly was broken down by like, hey, what kind of power sets do we already have that we've already experienced? How can we do something new? And how do we get enough Brotherhood people in there? So that I will tell you this. I think we could have selected any character, and Marvel would have said yes. The relationship back then with Marvel, they were just not who they are today, which again, I don't work with them now, but boy, they have everything lockstep. They know what they're doing, and it's great. As a fan, I absolutely love it. Back then, it was just way more of this Wild West of just like, yeah, sure. We worked with the Marvel guy over there was Ames Kirshen, who previously worked at Warner Brothers, and I think now he's back there. He was great. He was our main contact with Marvel, and he somehow managed to get nearly everything we wanted approved. I don't think there was a character we didn't want. So then when it came to selecting the characters, again, we knew we wanted the Brotherhood, and it's so interesting. I heard you guys were talking about underrated X-Men characters or underrated characters versus overrated, and it's funny. Back then, Scarlet Witch was underrated.
It was House of M that put her on the map.
100%. And that didn't end up coming out, I think, till 2005. So like when we were, I think, developing, or maybe it was 2006. I'm trying to remember. It was House of M wasn't there when we first started.
It wasn't. House of M was probably the summer before the game was released. Yes, if I'm remembering it correctly, because I was in New York the summer of House of M, and then I went back to FSU, and that's where I played X-Men Legends 2.
Perfect.
On my off-site apartment, off-campus apartment. It was like the coolest guy because I had X-Men Legends 2.
Those are the good days, right? Going to college just playing games. Those are fun. So Scarlet Witch was someone I loved her story. I just thought she was she seemed like a good person, but yet she's caught as this daughter of the evil Magneto. And I just always thought she was a cool character. So right away we kind of were like, great, let's use her. And then we knew we wanted to at least have Quicksilver as like one of the people that gets grabbed by Apocalypse, because then that helps give Magneto more of a motivation, come in and join it. So honestly, we started with like, who are the best Brotherhood people to use? And that was kind of like, because we knew we were going to do that. And then the X-Men, it was tough. It was really, I will tell you, a lot of battles. There was no right or wrong answer. Sometimes it was just from a production standpoint. My thing was, I felt like all the characters were a touch shallow in X-Men when it came to their powers. And so a big push for me was, as an RPG fan, I like taking something and building and like completing and getting tons of skill trees. I just think that's a lot of fun. So, and I think fans are like, well, if I'm a fan of Storm, that's who I want to play. And I want to just do more with her and that character. So I was like, let's give them even more powers, even more skills. So that way, if someone does truly grab Storm and play her from second number 1 to hour number 40, they feel like they can keep powering up and leveling up. So deeper powers, more powers. And that meant it was tough for us to have too huge of a cast. And so we just had to whittle it down. So the team, people would vote. We'd have Excel spreadsheets, that people would kind of say like, who would rank to the top and the bottom. And that's kind of how it ultimately landed.
Okay. So this question was going to come. Who got cut? Who would have been playable but got cut?
Yeah, I was thinking about that question, and we had touched on Polaris for a while. I think we even might have made her skin, and someone had been messing with it.
I literally did that. I have screenshots on my photo bucket because the
Oh,
PC
jeez.
version I was able to get the skins for her, and she had her purple costume, and you could play as Polaris. And then I forgot how I did this because I am not a programmer,
Yeah.
but I took Magneto's powers and I was able to put it on
Oh,
Polaris. And so she would, fly around like that,
that's
but
awesome.
like her animation and stuff. But so Polaris, yes, I figured Polaris was because her skins
Yeah.
were in the game. They were available.
And then Cable was another one that ultimately I believe went to the PSP. Um,
Dude, the PSP version is my favorite version because two of my favorite X-Men are Cannonball and Nate Gray.
oh, perfect.
So
Perfect.
I bought a PSP specifically just so I could play that. And then I tried to port it to my TV because I wanted like the big gameplay experience, but it was like this big on a
Yeah,
big screen TV.
I love Cable's story. I love everything about Cable. And so that was when I thought we could get in right away. And it became a time sink. And so we only kind of started a few things. So when the PSP came along, it was like, hey, it can go there. So honestly, those are the big ones where ultimately anyone that was ever even considered for the most part would make it into, another one of the versions of the game. So and we did a really good job of scheduling the content in this one. We knew we only had those like 11 months or so. Um, so yeah, there was not a ton of content at all from X-Men Legends 2.
What about characters like Emma, Magma, and Psylocke? I know we kind of talked about it that you've gotten some hate for that, but I'm curious why they were selected to Emma, for example, who was very big in the books, why she was selected more as a non-playable character, and then you put her obviously as part of I know it wasn't the 12, but the 4, I believe it was. Why was she thrown there and not put on the team, for example?
That I believe when we talked about it, because we knew Magma was going to potentially be an issue. We knew Emma would potentially be an issue, and we felt like, hey, from a power set standpoint, we liked what we had, and we weren't sure where to go with her next. I think the problem is we just were like, people weren't as excited about making Emma. I mean, I hate to say it, like, but we, from a story perspective, I loved, like, Rob had told me all about the Stepford Cuckoos, and I was like,
Oh,
what?
I love that you see the Trinity. That was
Yes.
such an iconic line. By the way, I'm so sorry. I'm talking to you, but I'm on my photo bucket and I hacked Emma too.
Oh, good for you. That's
Hang on.
awesome.
I'm trying to put it in the chat so you can see it.
Oh, sweet. That's cool.
But yeah, I think what you did with Emma and when they went to the shrine and the temple, I thought it was so great. Hang on, I'm trying to see if I can. I'm like, I
Yeah,
use
that
Zoom
was
every single day, and I'm like, how do you do this?
I mean, that's where it's like, we loved Emma the character, and that
Yeah.
I had no idea what had happened with the whole Stepford thing, and then Rob brought me the comics, and I was like, what? They like harvested her eggs, and like, that, dude, that's a
That was
sick
Phoenix
twisted.
War Song.
It's like, oh, that's a twisted deal. And so, anyways,
Poor Emma.
yeah. So we just want to get that. I was like, that's a cool story. And one of the things we had always hoped when we did that kind of stuff is we hoped it sparked an interest
Hmm.
in somebody where it was like, that happened to me for the X-Men animated series. I'm sitting there watching it and I was like, what? Who is this character? What's the deal with this? And you want to just learn more about it. So that was really one of our goals, is to say, um, like, for instance, when we put the Savage Land in there, I remember it was like, hey, let's put the Savage Land in there, and then like we would try to make objectives that would help explain like parts of the comic, like the atmospheric generators would be like your objective. And so we just tried to like get as much lore and little pieces of info, so that way someone that's a fan of that can be like, oh, I know what that is, I'm so cool. And if you're not a fan of it, maybe for a few of you, it'd kind of make you want to read up on that.
Well, I love what you just said because I didn't think about it until just now. But yeah, X-Men Legends 2 did have that animated series feel to it, which is there were so many characters. They were done well. They were respected. Their histories were respected. You didn't dumb it down for the gamer, and it incited that curiosity for others. And you also did that with the skins. You did the Age of Apocalypse skins as well. So thank you for that. That's great.
Yeah, no, it's I appreciate that very much, and it just came from the team that had everyone had their own personal story about why they wanted this skin in the game or why they wanted this costume, and they'd come into you and they go, "No, you don't understand. So and so got in a battle," and they'd had this big long story about it. Sometimes I admit to your audience, I am not nearly the geek in the Marvel repertoire that some of these other guys are, and I just listen to these stories and I'm like, whoa. If there's even just like a dozen people out there that know that kind of story like you do, like, yeah, sure, let's get the skin in the game. That's cool.
But I think the Leewald said this in our interview with them, where they were like, "We're writers. We want to put that foundation, then we'll build up." With you, you do video games. You were a programmer. It is your industry. You just want to do a really good game, and you're just building from the ground up, and then you learn the lore as you go along. And I think that was evident in X-Men Legends 1 and 2. So how excited were you, though, to bring these characters to the forefront that never got the dues they deserved, like Blink, for example, and Polaris and Wanda? Again, because this is pre-WandaVision.
I know. It's crazy to think about it that, I mean, once all of a sudden, like, the Marvel movies started happening, I'm like, oh man, is that supposed to be Scarlet Witch? Is that what they're going for? It was a ton of responsibility, to tell you the truth. I mean, it was like, our big goal was like, hey, I remember like Bob would say, hey, let's just have fun with this. There's going to be people out there that don't know who these characters are. Our job is just to say, hey, how do we interpret like their voices? Like, how many of these characters had never had a voice before in any kind of media? And Bob was the one that was out there voice directing them and like getting all those voices in. So like Blink, for example, I love the fact that we could use Blink as an actual game feature with her teleportation and allowing people to go back and forth. Because again, in X-Men Legends 1, it was just a very structured game, which it worked great for that game. It was just like boom, 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 go here, here, here. I love like, oh, not only can we bring Blink into the game, but we can actually make her a main feature. Like, this is how the player will teleport around. It almost makes sense now. So that kind of stuff was exciting. And like Scarlet Witch, like I said, I was a huge fan of hers. And it is interesting, the passionate debates you get in where it's like, just some people would come into your office saying, I don't like the way we're treating this character, whatever else it is. And it was just a balance of always trying to go, okay, we can change those. If you're that passionate about it, we'll change that dialogue. Like, someone's like, they seem too dismissive of Professor X. They would never talk to Professor X like that. I was like, well, Marvel was okay with it. Like, they approved the script. And someone would come in and say, and I forget who it was, if it was like Toad that was being disrespectful. And I think the ultimate solve was one of the other X-Men, or maybe it was Magneto. Magneto like shuts up Toad in one of the mission briefings, or kind of talks down to him. In a sense, like Magneto was showing his respect to Charles. So anyways, kind of a tangent, but that was the fan base, luckily, was also working on the game, and it wasn't just, hearing about it afterwards.
So was a character like Blink on the table to be playable, since you had invested so much? Would she have been incorporated in the story? I'm assuming because you have Nightcrawler, you having two teleporting characters, like, Blink can get more dues here, but I'm just curious because, again, Blink is another character who we all love.
Yeah, so originally, yep, she was on the playable list, 100%. Sorry. So she was absolutely on the playable list, and then it started to become like this, like, well, wait a minute. Again, you have to speak to the mass audience. Nightcrawler's huge. Like, he was like the star of X-Men 2 movie, You've got to have Nightcrawler in there. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, that's non-negotiable.
Yeah, and it was like, understood. I love him too. And then it's exactly what you said. Sometimes the power sets, and that's kind of like the deal with Emma. It just felt like, well, wait, people feel like we already have that mix of powers in there. Let's just find different people. But then, like I said, it was like, well, if we can't use Blink as a character, how else can we use her? And it was NPC, and then that's when we were just kind of like, wait, she could be literally our teleport mechanic for getting back and forth. So that's kind of how it goes. It's never easy, I promise you. Marvel would have let us keep putting more characters in. It was just a matter of time, unfortunately.
So Marvel was really chill with anything you wanted. Did they say no maybe once on like someone you may have wanted? Because you all had Iron Man in there too. Was there like a bigger Marvel character you probably wanted, and they were like, no, like hang tight on that?
So they weren't big fans of us using Deadpool as a playable character.
Of course, that makes sense.
And I said, well, we're going to have him as an NPC. We think we can get him as a playable character. And it's really crazy. So Activision did this study, and this wasn't because of Deadpool, but, Activision's good about always market research, do the market research. So they had done this big study that basically asked a bunch of questions, but two of the questions were, do you know this character? Question number one, boom. And the next question was, do you like this character? And so that whole idea was like they could make a rating scale to say, hey, how popular is this character in terms of just people knowing them or her? And then how popular are they in terms of like, if they know about him, do they like him? So Deadpool on the do you know him was bottom of the list. Like nobody knew who Deadpool was, and that was kind of their way of saying, see, don't make him playable and there's no reason to do it. But he blew away on the other scale of the percentage of people that liked him. He was like in his 90s, and the next closest person was like in the 60%, meaning of the people that knew who Deadpool was, they all loved it. Yeah. And so that finally could let them convince us, like either convince them rather to say, okay, you guys go ahead and do it. You guys can have this kind of playable Deadpool thing or whatever. And Marvel was like, yeah, sure. Okay. If you guys really want to, but it has to be unlocked or whatever it is. The other characters, I know they had issues with, so we had considered trying to do a character artist, like Stan Lee, Jim Lee, Jack Kirby, Chris Claremont. Like we were like, hey, could we, if we made these,
oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah. If we made these guys as playable characters, could we unlock them in some kind of, I don't know how we do it. We were like, but the way we see them working is they would almost like have their powers of being able to draw or just change stuff in the universe if they wanted to. Like, that outline was there and we're like, oh, what if we just took the skin away and just the inking was left for one of the powers and, all the other stuff. And they were totally against it. Marvel was not. Ames let us know that's going to be a bigger uphill battle than you realize. And so it was just kind of like we stayed away from them. The Iron Man thing, I think we had reached out to Marvel saying, hey, there's a couple of characters we're thinking about adding, right? And we talked about maybe would it be Captain America, maybe would it be Iron Man? And they had kind of ushered us towards the Iron Man thing. And at the time, no, we had no idea
that Robert Downey Jr. was going to redefine cinema with his Tony Stark.
Totally. It was just like, and they didn't give us any kind of hint of that whatsoever. But what's interesting is once Marvel Ultimate Alliance had come out, we were reached out to by Marvel because they wanted all of our files for Iron Man's powers to give to. They said, hey, Favreau is asking for like different power ideas. And we knew you guys, Marvel at the time, the Ultimate Alliance was a huge hit. And so they were like, can you just send all like the files, the movie files for all his different powers? And so we, maybe they can use something like that in the movie. And of course we were geeks. We were like, oh my God, that's amazing. Yes. So we did that.
I want to circle back on the PSP exclusives because, as I said, I love Nick Gray and I love Cannonball and Cable, and you also threw in Dark Phoenix. Yeah. Was it just timing that you couldn't get them? Or was it negotiable, or was it a negotiating contract thing with PlayStation?
Yeah, it's definitely it's a little bit of both. Like timing wise, it was tight for us to fit in anything else. Like we were maxed out. You
had 11 months.
Yeah, it was crazy. And they even pulled our data in a couple more weeks. So we were like in trouble. So then there was this another team that was helping obviously with developing the PSP, and they had that more time. And we had said, hey, Cable, we'd always want to get them in or whatever. And we had kind of thrown them our list of like different characters that we potentially thought of. And luckily there's some fans over there, but the Sony stuff, definitely they got involved, like even to the point where, man, and later I think in like the Marvel and the Ultimate Alliance, like it's kind of amazing. At some point corporate structure takes over and it's like, well, just so you know, Target wants to see if you can give away this character as part of their promotion, and so wants this character as part of their promotion. And that was part of the thing with the PSP, and the Sony was like, I think that's how Dark Phoenix got in there, because they didn't feel, I don't think that they felt the others were big enough names. Yeah. The Cables and Cannonballs, they didn't see that, but Dark Phoenix, everyone knew that was.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, give them a big name like that. And I'm pretty sure that's how she got in there.
So Cable, so I just understand it correctly. Cable, Nate, and Dark Phoenix, they were on the list to be in the main console game, and
They
then it's
were,
just production. You were just like, well, we can't do it, but the team doing the PSP version, we can give them that.
yeah, and trust me when I say on the list, it was a list of like, hey, it was a, there's tons of characters. Like, I think even Emma Frost was still on there in a sense. We were like, oh, can we just unlock her afterwards or whatever? So we had given that like these 8 or 10 different, like, hey, here's a bunch of different characters we had considered. What excites you guys? The guys that
Gotcha.
were helping with the PSP. It's an important part of like, you just want the teams to be passionate about what they're working on. And ultimately, those are the 4 that were decided on.
I got you. So you guys did update the looks for the game, and one of them was Jean, who had her hardcore ultimate look with her like really short hair, but this one was sort of a mesh of her long hair with the ultimate look. And then Rogue got more her traditional look as opposed to the ultimate look. Did you guys do that consciously because those looks were poor received, or did you just want to do something different?
I hope I don't get in trouble with any fans. I am not a huge fan of the ultimate looks.
No one is.
Okay.
No one is. You're totally fine. Don't worry.
I hated Jean's short hair.
We all hated Jean's short hair.
It actually, yeah, even today, if I Google that picture of her, like, listen, the art's great. Artist did a great job. And
of course. It's not a rag on the art or anything. It's just the ultimate looks were just not fan favorites.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things where I think somehow Marvel had maybe more of a hands, and like Pat kind of talked about this. Pat Libbo talked about this previously. Yeah. Is they were really pushing that kind of look, and
they absolutely were.
I love color. I like superheroes, man. I want colorful costumes, the Jim Lee stuff. I mean, I don't know. I like big, bold, impressive colors, and so that's the direction I wanted to go with as many of the costumes. A bunch of people did. So that's where the motivation for that hair came from. And again, Marvel didn't push back. I was like, dudes, we're getting rid of that hair. But listen, we can kind of keep a nod, because at the time you never want to totally insult or cut off a segment of, potential fandom. Like, again, like I did with Psylocke, apparently. So it's not like we wanted to get rid of the ultimate look completely. And also, we want to make sure to not be dismissive of what Marvel wanted either.
Okay, I need to ask about like the Psylocke hate you got. Like, what?
Yeah, it's just, oh man, there were people like, it's unfortunate because we were making the list of characters to go in the game, and I didn't realize, and you'd think I would have been smarter, how many female characters I cut out ultimately, because suddenly Juggernaut, Toad, and Magneto all had to come in for the Brotherhood. And it ended up with like a disproportionately more male cast. And yeah, there's just a lot of like, there's a joke that goes around. They call me Dave Vondrak because somebody on some forum was railing against Dave Vondrak, which was me. He couldn't spell my name right. Just railing on this X-Men forum about, oh my God, how much I must hate women and all this other stuff. And like, the team here at Raven loved it. They thought it was the funniest thing ever. So to this day, I still occasionally get called Dave Vondrak. So it was just a lot of, like, a couple emails got sent, and I always would respond back to any emails I got sent saying, hey, sorry, love the passion. She just didn't make it. So, I mean, listen, I don't fault fans at all for being passionate. We all are fans of something. So I've got zero problem with any of the passion.
No, but you brought in, I mean, we got Strife, we got, again, Destiny, we got Blink, we got so many characters. We got the stuff for Cuckoos. I mean, that game was jam-packed with characters. You did the best you could with that landscape. And, when you start looking at it from a production standpoint, like, yeah, you have to make room for the Brotherhood. Although, I mean, Toad, like, but
I know that's the one. We had to do it, and Bob was like, "Hey, he'll give us a great character play back and forth. He
was a great playable character, by the way. I mean, his power set was unique. I understand from a production standpoint why you would do that.
I'm not a huge Toad fan, to be totally honest. I didn't even like him in the movies. I love the X-Men 1 and 2 movies, and I didn't even like him in the movies, but it was like, yeah, it's just one of those, it's like, he's popular enough, good moveset. We had already had experience with him from the first 8 games, so let's include him.
So I'm looking at my photo bucket, and I'm going to ask you about two characters. Havoc, you had Havoc there. You had the skin
Yes.
there. Was he cut too in the end as being playable?
Yeah. Man, he might have been. I'm trying to remember if he was in X-Men 1.
He was not. He was supposed to be in X-Men
Yes.
1 in the dystopian future. He would have been playable, but
Yeah, that's right. The whole Greek weird, the Zeus, the kind of like Greek mythology thing we're gonna do.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's I think we're totally discussed. I remember discussing that, and then just yeah, again, just didn't make it in.
How about Dazzler?
Yeah, so okay, she gets talked about a lot, and everyone felt like we didn't like. Okay, we had Jubilee, and we knew what Jubilee's powers were. And Dazzler, it's kind of like with the Kitty Pryde thing. It was like, okay, Kitty Pryde, could we have done her the same way Nightcrawler worked? But Dazzler, it was discussed. That was one of the ones that was close to being on the list. But nobody, I don't know what it was, man. It was like there wasn't enough love to people like the character, but just people are like, we don't know what we do with the powers. It's going to be so different. And it's going to be so cool that we want to include her.
Yeah. Yeah. I asked because I think she was like Dazzler's nightclub was a PC exclusive. I may be making that up.
Yeah, man, I don't remember if that was the case.
And her skin was there. I was pleasantly surprised when I found the skin, or I mean, I'm assuming I was pleasantly surprised. I don't remember finding the files there. I don't remember how that happened. But the reason why I'm asking is because I think at the time I didn't know, were these characters meant to be playable and just, for all the reasons we've just discussed, were not, or were these just the skins for NPCs that I can now coincidentally utilize?
Well, I'll tell you what. So the artists, because we always wanted to be ahead of schedule, and the artists loved doing it, they would crank on skins well before anything was approved. They said, what are you guys even thinking? Give us realms of possibility. And they would just start adding stuff. And I think, I'm sure there were times when if they had their own favorite characters, they would just make the skins and then be like, hey, well, the skins are already made, so we could add this even as an NPC. So I know those guys were cranking out, and I mean, that's what's released on the disc. I'm guessing if like we look back at the old drives at Raven, there are probably more skins that were done for characters that were just never completed. Because again, it always meant like we wanted to make sure and treat every character right. So what we would argue back with the team is like, you guys, it can't just be a skin override. The animators want to make sure they animate it properly. The voiceover, the special conversation. Every time we add another character, it's like, well, what about special conversations? What about just not just doing like lip service? What about some kind of storyline that contains that player or that character? And so we didn't want to just make it a skin override, so that's probably where some of those extra skins came in, were just the artists going through doing it on their own.
I got that. That's really cool. What was it like working with Sir Patrick Stewart? He came back. Was he signed on for? Well, no, because you guys decided to do a sequel. I wasn't like in the contract. It was easy just to get him back. Like you were just like, come on, Sir Pat.
I mean, okay, so professional. If like you take away one word from Mr. Stewart, it was like professional. I could not believe he was always there, ready to do the lines, barely had to do any retakes, but ask really good questions. Never, trust me. First of all, okay, so many things to talk about. So Patrick Stewart, he was great to work with, and no, we didn't have him. And man, was he huge! I couldn't believe Activision got him to even do it, and I couldn't believe like the stuff we were having him say. Like, I wonder if he was just reading these scripts, going, "What am I saying?" It's like, dinosaurs and savage, whatever it is. It's just like the goofiest stuff. He must have just been like, I don't even know these are English words. He was fantastic. He would ask like, did you want me to do that again? I mean, some other actors are just like, here's what I'm saying. They don't want to be asked to do lines again. And he was just beyond professional. Blown away. I'm not sure. Hugh Jackman is right up there with him. Hugh was great when we did the X-Men Origins Wolverine game. And so those two were just beyond professional, super nice, always on time, never any issues. And we had to work across. We were doing recording. Like a lot of times we just do it there in LA. Like either we'll fly to LA and we'll do their studio sessions there. Or in Patrick's case, he was doing it from, I believe, London at the time. And we had to have a kind of special setup and like, you know, to go all the way across the pond or whatever. And it was like, no, you need to do this and that. And you have these things set up.
So you were able to go to London to record with him?
No, so we never did. We only recorded remotely like that. I think only one time we happened to be in LA when we were able to get him in the studio there. But he was really.
But you met him IRL. You met him in real life.
Yes. So barely, because I was only at that one session. Bob was the guy that did, Bob Love. He did like 99% of the sessions with Patrick, and it was just, yeah, he was more chill than I would expect from those guys. Trust me, some people are not. I won't say who this actor was. We were working on the X-Men Origins Wolverine game, and there was a character that had a line. This was not Hugh. Hugh was amazing. There was a character that had a line, and we were working based off the movie, right? So we had this scene that was in the movie, and we had to have, of course, recreate it for the game. And so he gets to this line, and he goes, he apparently thought we were the movie guys, because he's like, I told you before, we already had this argument. I'm not reading this goddamn line or whatever. He was so upset about this line. And Bob at the time was like, well, if we could just get something close to it. And he refused to do this line because apparently they had a big showdown in the movie, and then no one ever told us about like how apparently he hated this line. Anyway, so some actors can be tough to work with. But for the most part, the voice actors that we got, I mean, first of all, Patrick Stewart, amazing, super professional for being so well known. And all the other voice actors, these guys were so geeked to just be voicing some of these people, you know, like Steve Blum, Wolverine. He was like, he almost like he became de facto Wolverine for a while.
Yeah, and, no, this is where he began.
I mean, so they loved it. They were totally into it. They were just willing to do more and more and more lines. Like we had them record so many lines, and they were great. All those voice actors, like I want to work with those cartoon guys as much as possible, because they are just they're so professional when it comes to doing multiple takes and stuff.
What was it like working on the CGI? Because that was a glow up. I mean, I love X-Men Legends 1, but it was a notable difference in the graphics. And even I'm looking at this now, and I was obviously looking at YouTube videos, but like look at Storm there. She's gorgeous. And I'm curious, like look at that. Look at Wolverine right there. What was it like? I remember thinking like, oh, it's only been a year since that game came out. And like, look at Cyclops, that opening scene where they rescue Xavier. And you see like Polaris has been abducted. They looked so incredible.
Yeah, so that was a decision early on by me to say, hey, listen, we had a lot of movies in X-Men 1, and I would rather have a couple of high quality, like, man, the best of the best that we can get that really set the stage for each act, and then let the game tell the rest of the story and not interrupt the gameplay as much the story. So we went out and we said, listen, there's this company called Blur, who we have seen their work, and it's amazing. And what's totally blows me away is that we reached out to Blur, CGI company that's like, oh yeah, we can make you great movies or whatever. The dude that founded Blur co-founded Blur is Tim Miller, and he's a huge Marvel fan, and he was like, I'm all over this, and he gave us, trust me, movies are expensive. Those kind of high runner movies are expensive. He gave us a massive deal because he was like, I want to do more of these, and I think he was angling to try to convince Marvel to let him make almost a full movie, right? And so Blur came on board. They were super passionate about it. Tim was a great guy, super like into his Marvel, and he would question like, this script should be like this and this script should be like that. He also did the Marvel Ultimate Alliance movies as well. What's funny is Tim is the guy that directed Deadpool, the first Deadpool movie.
Yes.
So it's like Tim ended up like I knew he had a huge passion for Marvel, and I think he was even trying to get like an introduction with the Marvel guys at first, and so like we all met together at E3 at one point. And it was crazy that years later, he ended up doing an amazing job with the Deadpool movie. And I was like, oh my God, that's Tim from Blur, like back in. And it was all just because it was like, let's find someone that could do an amazing job with these movies. So Blur was, man, they gave us a bargain, let me tell you, but they did a great job.
I love the scene where I believe it's Apocalypse who grabs a knife and throws it to Archangel, and Archangel grabs it. And then like the screen, like just the way it like spins around him, and you see that hate in his eyes. How was it like to finally bring Archangel to the game? And that was, again, to the listeners who didn't listen to our episode with Patrick, that was a concept they wanted, and you were able to carry it out. And would he have been playable, or was it still like an animation problem with the wings? Because I know the wings are their own characters.
Yeah, at the time there was definitely that animation problem with the wings, and I was so happy to get him in there because, again, I actually think Archangel is the cooler version of Angel. I don't know why. It's just like, oh, he's so cool. What we were trying to do, like what we had originally talked about, is me and Bob were like, is there any way to redeem him early enough, like get him to that point, but then redeem him so the player could play as him and just like kick ass with him for a while and see what that feels like. And the reveal of like him and then having to fight him as the boss battle all kind of just came too late. By that point, it was like, no, we're already like story momentum wise, we're on our way to Apocalypse, so it didn't make sense there. And yeah, I think we later figured out how to handle those kind of appendages better, but that's really what, because of the way the camera worked and the wings, that was where it was tough to deal with him. But we loved the rage. I was like, I just want to make sure we get across how angry this dude is. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm glad we finally, it was fun considering we thought we were going to do an X-Men Legends 1 to make it happen in X-Men Legends 2.
I do have some listener questions.
Great.
And they're fun. Are you ready for them?
Let's do it.
Okay. The first question, where's X-Men Legends 3? and I think a lot of people are asking that because it was left open for a sequel with Sinister there at the end. And then we jumped into Ultimate Alliance. So where is X-Men Legends 3?
I don't want to crush anybody's dreams. I'm not sure you'll ever see an X-Men Legends 3 from Raven. I mean, the passion's there. It's just, I don't know if it's going to line up with what we want to do. I could tell you what we had planned.
Yes. What did you plan for X-Men Legends 3?
What we wanted to do for X-Men Legends 3 was, we were going down the trail. We love this idea that Sinister was going to kind of wrap everything that happened in 1 and part of what happened in 2 and, bring that into X-Men Legends 3. And so the initial story ideas was to go with Onslaught. I
love Onslaught so much.
So because we love the idea of being able to say, hey, Shadow King in 1, and he had trapped Professor X and used part of his mind. And then Apocalypse said, we're going to use the angle with Quicksilver. Like we're going to try to say, hey, well, Quicksilver, and that's kind of where the DNA from Magneto comes from. And ultimately, Mr. Sinister, that's why he was so happy on top of that pyramid, because he wanted Apocalypse defeated. He didn't care. His goal was never he just needed Apocalypse to bring these guys together, to grab what he needed, and then ultimately make Onslaught for, and again, we would not have been any kind of official Onslaught story. We would have done our own thing with it. And what we had talked about was, we were talking about letting you make your own character. So we had kind of written up a whole design doc where what we wanted was the player to have this secret background that you would just, like when you first create your character, you would just pick just a few sentences of the background, and ultimately you didn't know what happened until the end, and you'd find out like one version was your background was that you were actually created in a Weapon X by the Weapon X program, and you were going to be able to like defeat Onslaught that way. Another was like, well, no, Bishop actually brought you from the future and you didn't realize that your memories were wiped, and he brought back, because the future that Onslaught, kind of Days of Future Past, and the Onslaught future, he does win, and this world becomes corrupted, and everything goes to hell. And so Bishop brings you back in time. So we were trying to like pull in multiple different storylines from what we were going to do with your character. But ultimately we just were like, are people going to be accepting of you playing as your own character, or do people just ultimately want to play as the X-Men / Brotherhood again? So that's kind of where our head was headed for 3 for sure. It was like, it was going to be an Onslaught story based on that character. So that's as far as we got, though, before we moved on to obviously Ultimate Alliance.
Well, so Onslaught was not only a big X-Men crossover, it was a big Marvel crossover. Were you thinking that maybe you could bring in the Avengers that way?
So yeah, that's totally that. for 100%. So we had thought to ourselves, hey, if we start this, like we just kind of unlocked that, we had opened the gate a little bit with Iron Man in X-Men Legends 2. And it was like, can we open that door even further with Onslaught? Like, not at first, like it still has to be an X-Men based game. But can we do it that way? And so those were some of the initial discussions about that. And that's where we had hoped it was going. And I don't know if ultimately, I can tell you, I mean, I know how we ultimately got to Ultimate Alliance, how that ended up there. But it was all about, at first it was, hey, create your character, go against Onslaught, even potentially.
That just sounds so great.
Yeah, and we talked about, like, what if we let the player choose to ultimately side with Onslaught? Is that possible? Could you choose to be good or evil?
The answer is yes. Always side with
I know.
And that's very telling of the time. You had Fable that was
Yes.
infamous for that level of storytelling and those choices. And I think we would see those choices play out in Ultimate Alliance and sort of how with the game endings.
Yeah, exactly.
Where is the re-release of this game? Exclamation point, question mark.
Yeah, I know they did, it's a bummer. It's like I wish I had some kind of control over that. I absolutely wish I do. I know they really re-released something. It might have been Marvel Ultimate Alliance a few years ago, but I don't think people were happy with necessarily how they did it. That is, unfortunately, it's out of our hands. I would love it. I would absolutely love it if they could re-release it.
Agreed. If anyone from Marvel is listening to this and they have the power to re-release X-Men Legends, please. Here's another one. Can we get a remastered copy, please?
Yeah, that would be great.
That would be wonderful.
God, the art team would absolutely love. Oh man, making all those costumes, that'd be amazing.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Yeah, if you guys just like reskinned the game and just kept oh god, that would be chef's kiss. Hang on, because you already answered most of these questions. I'm just trying to.
No worries, man.
How do you? I don't know what this question is, so you would know. How do you translate comic book powers to static video game format with LTD buttons?
I mean, I'll tell you this: we kind of found our groove with the idea that it was like, once we could, you could use that one button, I think the trigger button, to kind of open up those 4 powers. And it was just like, once we got in that groove of like, hey, some are defensive, some are offensive, one of them is a boost. It actually became, we had more powers than we knew what to do with. Like, when I look back at some of the old sheets for like, hey, what could we make? Whatever, Cyclops' powers, there's just so many possibilities of what we could do. It was always like, what's the most iconic? That was first. Like, what's everyone going to expect to be able to do? Like, Storm's got to throw whirlwinds. At the time, you're sitting there thinking, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, we don't even have the physics for that. How's it going to work? It's just, that was a ton of fun to figure out how to do it. Or like Scarlet Witch, man, and like all that kind of nonsense we could do with her. That was just a ton of fun. And it was up to the programmers at the time that would go, hey, and animators to go, yep, we can figure out a way to stretch bones if we want to do this or that. So, there's tons of fun to make those different powers, that's for sure.
Was there ever a character that you just felt like, oh, I don't want to be working on this character because it's too not that you had a vendetta against a character or anything, unless it was Beast, that's totally fine. But where you're like, oh, like I can't get the powers right. This character is so troublesome from like a glitchy perspective. Like, I think I'm trying to ask, like, who was your least favorite character to work on in the game? And knowing, listeners, it's not a personal attack on the character, just because of the mechanics and everything.
Yeah, the ones that were the psionic kind of powers were just a little.
You're not talking about Jean Grey, are you?
It's where you go after that. That was always our problem with that. It was like we felt like we had stretched it so far where it was like, okay, they can pick stuff up, they can throw it around. We can, I guess, come up with energy mind blast, but that didn't seem as good as like we wanted, like, to control other characters and like, we had talked about stuff like that. So I think those kind of the psychic powers were just a little limiting in terms of like what we could do with it. We felt it was a lot of fun making them at first, and then it was like, how much farther can we go with these characters versus just the much more physical. It's just so much more you can do with, like, when like a character has a special weapon they use, or like Ghost Rider's chains or whatever it is. It was like, hey, those are new, different ways to handle this character. So I just think it got a little like, even the effects guys were like, hey, there's only so many different ways I can represent Psychic. It's just a tough deal to kind of get across in a video game.
I can't believe you came on my front lawn and you're telling me Jean Grey and Nate Grey were the characters that gave you the most grievance, or the psionic characters. I cannot believe that. I guess your name is David now, right? Was that what they said? Dave?
Yes, Dave Vondrak, yeah.